Italia.
On. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see everybody. It's amazing to be in this gorgeous room. If you all are here to learn about how to level up your local news organization quickly and as easily as can be done, you're in the right place. I'm Sarah Alvarez. I'm the founder and the editor-in-chief of Outlier Media. Our session did not have a description, so let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to tell you all the things that we wish we would have known or done sooner. Outlier is 7 years old. We started with a $70,000 budget and one person, and now we have a team of 15 and a budget of, that's what I thought, $1.8 million. Candice is in charge of that. This is Candice Fortman. She's our executive director. She runs the business side while I run the editorial side. And we're really proud of what we've done and what we've built, and we think that we have some answers for other people who are trying to really create impact in their community. But we are also a local newsroom in the city of Detroit, which is a place where too many people are still struggling and where harm is being created every day by corporations, by elected officials, and by individuals. So we still have a lot to do. So some of these lessons are ones that we keep really close to us while we keep trying to level up. So even though we're going to talk about what we wish we would have done, the first question that I have for you is, what do you think you did most right?
Taking this job, so start there. It's the best decision, one of the best decisions I've ever made. But it is because I deeply love Detroit. I'm a native Detroiter, and I was doing work that I thought was important and was important. But meeting Sarah and hearing her vision really aligned with what I hoped for Detroit. And so taking a risk, taking a bet that we could turn that $70,000 into $100,000 and then $200,000, even though it didn't really feel clear where the answers were going to come from. So I guess the simple answer is our belief in ourselves has been really valuable, and building a team that is the best in the nation.
That's true. And they may be watching, so if so, we're so happy we get to represent the team in Italy. But we do this with a team of 15 people that are incredible. And so thank you to our team.
So what is the thing that you think you did right?
I think the thing that, I forgot to say, we have a tip sheet. It's going to be on an iPad here. You can just scan the code, and there will be concrete things. So, and it's not going to be a rehashing of what we say here, it's new things. But I think the most important thing that I did right was to center the whole operation around the idea of filling information gaps. And I think if you do that, you can't go wrong, and you can't help but create value along the way. And you also can't help but focus on filling needs for people who need local news to deliver most. And I think a lot of local news gets away from that and follows people who have money or who they think can support or who love them, and you just want to keep that feedback loop going. So I think focusing on information gaps first, and then the thing that I learned second, not until we had like, more than a few pieces coming out every few months when it was just me, but we use a harm matrix to kind of decide where to put our most of our investigative resources. And so we don't do an investigation unless it's causing either a significant amount of harm for a large group of people, a really acute harm for a small group of people. So that's like stories about like prisons and jails. That harm is incredibly acute, and it's the hands of the state creating that harm, so we do those. Or a harm that is only in Detroit, which really shows that there's something wrong, like there's some accountability gap that doesn't exist in other places, but somebody's not doing their job in Detroit or trying to get away with something in Detroit, and we know that that's another place where we should put our resources. Those are the things that I feel like we did right.
Absolutely, I'd agree.
Okay, so my question for you is, on the fundraising side, it's not easy. How do you fundraise when you're not connected to wealth? And when you work in a community, we're a nonprofit newsroom, when you work in a community where there is not necessarily a lot of wealth?
So in our case, and this is true in the States, I talk to a lot of folks outside of the States about building newsrooms, and the funding mechanisms are very different, so I'm sorry if this does not translate directly, but in the States there are a lot of philanthropic dollars that help support the vast majority of nonprofit journalism in the country. And it can be difficult to get into those rooms if you don't know people, if you're not deeply connected. And so I would say if you are in that place, which is the place we found ourselves, one, if you can, start locally. Start with the relationships that you have. Ask everyone you know, do they know someone? You would be shocked who knows who happens to go to somebody's school, whose kids take gymnastics together, and would be willing to make an introduction for you. But then I would also say is that you have to get really, really good at describing and translating your mission to many people, and particularly to people who might not understand the work that you're doing. If you are trying to do journalism in the way that we are, serving communities that have been traditionally underserved by journalism, there might be people who are like, this does not seem like a good investment. Your job is to make them understand why it is not just a good investment, it is an imperative investment, that our fates are intertwined. So we cannot leave people behind in a community if we expect for all of us to be able to thrive and live in that community. And so learning how to really get clear about your mission, your values, and what that adds to the community at large will be incredibly important to be able to, when you finally get in those rooms, you need to be able to really, really pull that message ahead quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I remember another little thing is you have to consider yourself a fundraiser. Even if you are not a fundraiser, I am not a fundraiser by trade. This is my first job fundraising outside of, Girl Scout cookies or something. But I had to convince myself that that was a skill set that not only could I do, but that I become really good at. And that means giving myself a lot of training, learning from people who are incredibly good at fundraising, and also using the parts of me, so the parts of your journalism skills that actually help you, particularly research, and getting into those rooms and finally getting the money in the door. All righty. So, what do we do to build a team and create an environment that inspires growth?
I have this question for you too.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'll answer it first. I mean, it was a long time before we had a team. I do think that what has been essential is that we bring people in who believe very much in using journalism as a service and as a skill, and in serving the community. So I think that what we've been able to do is use the skills that we have, the ethical code that we have, and just apply it to needs that are that come from the community. I think that's why we've been able to build such a great team, is because everybody is trying to do that. It's difficult to know how to balance kind of community input and participation and the news function. I think for a long time people thought that because we were so community driven that we couldn't be doing really rigorous work, and that's obviously not true. the majority of our community participation comes in just like how we choose what we cover. We also have a text message based system that answers questions that people have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it works in kind of like a chatbot way, but there's always journalists who are able to answer those questions and follow up with people. That then works as a driver for investigations too. People who work on the team all want to be in that text message system and know what's coming through that text message system. Nobody feels like that's not their job and that they have something more important to do. I think that that's what you do to build a great team is everybody specializes, but everybody's on board with what the most important thing we do is, which is to like intervene directly and fill information gaps for people. So what do you think?
I think
It's like more your
on the business side in particular, I had to get really clear with what I was not good at as a leader, like where my skill sets end and where somebody else's skill sets would begin and fill out sort of where I was. So for instance, my 7th grade math teacher would have told you this child is not great at math, and he was not wrong. And so when it comes to budgets, I wanted to make sure that when we hired an operations and finance person, that they were someone really good at the numbers. I wanted to make sure that there was someone to check me to make sure that I was looking at the numbers correctly. And not only that, but they brought an idea of how do we tell our story through our money so that I could better translate that again when we're fundraising. But I would also say making sure that our all of our hires are connected to what Detroiters need most. So even on the editorial side, making sure that we're bringing in people who understand and have a respect for the people of the city of Detroit, and who live in the community and want to put their feet in the community. We talk about a lot that you just can't sit in a newsroom, like you also have to go live and breathe the city as well. And it makes your work connect better. It makes it easier in some ways for you to do that work. But I think also having policies and principles that center the people who work for us, making sure that our parental leave covered not just mothers, but fathers, and also people adopting, and that our bereavement leave covered not just close relatives, but also people who might have family members or friends that they consider family. How do we create policies? And that's the joy of being able to build from the beginning and to be small, is that you get to do that. And I think it's why our team is so dedicated and loyal.
You know, that was going to be my follow-up, though, because I do think that we have an incredible team, and we have an incredible partnership, but how do you feel about that word loyalty? Because I think part of what we've been able to do is not demand that and believe in people for, not because they work with us.
Well, loyalty meaning that you don't own them. Like, my dream in the world is that all these people that we are hiring and training and that they're growing in our newsroom come into your newsrooms and you call me one day and say, I want everybody who's ever come out of Outlier to come work in my newsroom because these are the baddest folks in land. That is what we mean by loyalty, right? Like, while they're there, they're happy, they're doing their work, they're persistent, but that we know that one day they will move on to other places. And when they move on to those places, that people find value in what they bring from our newsroom into other newsrooms. And we've seen it happen through our very first full-time hire. She is now at the Washington Post, and when we talk to her, we can still hear those value statements that came out of Outlier. She's brought them to the San Francisco Chronicle and now at the Washington Post.
And I think we're going to have time. We want to answer a lot of questions, so we're going to switch to questions in just 1 second. But the other thing I think that we learned, and I'm glad that we didn't make this mistake, is that we weren't like, oh, we don't have any money, so let's just do what we can, and then we'll do things right when we do have money. We never relied on unpaid labor. We are going to maybe get our first intern this summer. We're already 15 people in because we wanted to be able to provide a really good experience for that person. We are one of the smallest newsrooms in Detroit, and our incoming pay for reporters is higher than every other news organization in the city. We didn't.
By design.
Yeah. no, it's because we're just like pockets of cash. It's just that like we didn't want to do things in a way that then would create like these unintended consequences or perpetuate the harm that so many people feel in newsrooms and that we felt in newsrooms, right? And we felt exploited by. So I think that that's true with our text message system too. We didn't say, well, let's like make an app first because it's going to be a little bit more interesting and sexier. And then maybe we'll do text messages. We did the uncool thing first. And I don't think we ever really will need to get to the app because that's what people said they wanted and it works.
Finally, I would say, I'm going to ask you a question before we go to questions from the audience. And so we're working on a strategic plan. It's a lot of fun. And I mean that it actually is a lot of fun. 5 years from now, there will be a version of Outlier that other people would have built, and it won't be the two of us. What do you hope remains, and what do you hope might look different?
That's a good question. What I hope remains is the focus on Detroiters, is the focus on harm reduction, is the focus on investigations that try to put money back in people's pockets and materially improve the lives of people in Detroit. I hope that that remains. What I hope is different is that we're able to, that we are like collaborative enough, that we're flourishing enough to also be able to focus more on what we want to grow into, which is connecting people. People feel really disconnected from each other, and the news often makes you feel even more disconnected, and it polarizes. That's kind of the point of a lot of attention-getting news. And if it's not the point, it's the consequence. So I really hope that we're able to have beats that make people feel so connected to the city and to their neighbors, like prep sports is a dream of mine. I would love to cover prep sports. That does make people feel connected.
And soccer because they're so gorgeous.
They are so, okay,
That's
HR.
just for me.
And we do cover some arts and culture now, but Detroit is a center of culture for the country and the world. And I think when people can like tap into that legacy often and we can help them do that, that is only going to make people feel stronger and better. So I hope that that's what we can do. Mm-hmm. So let's ask, we are here to answer questions. Oh, great. Okay. And I can't see anything, so okay, great. All right, so.
Thank you so much. Candice, do you have an elevator fundraising pitch, and can we hear it?
Do I have an elevator pitch?
An elevator fundraising pitch.
Yes.
Can we hear it?
Yeah. Outlier Media is a nonprofit organization serving Detroiters and centering their needs. We operate in a way that reduces harm in the city of Detroit, making sure that we return resources back to the citizens. We also ensure that our team members are trained and paid so that they can increase the amount of journalism happening in Detroit. We're a collaborative newsroom. We work with newsrooms across the city, including the Free Press and TV News, to ensure that the work that we do reaches audiences, not just like the ones that we are most concerned with, but also the audiences that we don't know we exist. And we work in partnership with our funders to ensure that our work moves not only Detroiters, but the system of an ecosystem of journalism as a whole.
She's so good, isn't she? You're so good. Okay.
Hi, I'm from a local magazine in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. This is very inspiring, thank you. Just one question, how did you find which information were gaps?
I love this question. I could talk about information needs all day. And if you scan this, I have some of the questions that we use in our survey. So we run an information needs survey every year. What we do is we do a text message-based survey, and we ask people questions not about information, but about challenges, because we have found, and this is I think really important, we have found that resource gaps are a really good proxy for information gaps, and information gaps are an incredible proxy for accountability gaps. So when you can find out what people are really struggling with in your community, then you can kind of start this chain. We also do a lot of work around public data. So we look at in the United States, it's 911, right? So like if you have an emergency, you call 911. We look at that data and find out like what are people saying is an emergency and how many of those things are things that wouldn't be an emergency if resources were distributed in a better way or people were more accountable. So there's like so many data sets that you can use that don't necessarily seem like they have anything to do with information gaps, but they absolutely do. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Ricardo from Portugal. I wanted to ask you if you ever decided to fire people, and if so, can you please describe the process of arriving to that decision and also the process of like executing the decision?
I have actually never had to fire anyone at Outlier, thankfully, but I have had to certainly let people go in other places. In some cases, it was because of extreme harm that they caused. I worked in commercial radio for a while, and someone drunk drove a vehicle into a building, so that person had to go because they broke not only a law, but a policy. And so in that case, it wasn't a very kind conversation. But in cases where someone was just not a good match and you could tell that it was not going to work, I have found that one, making sure that you can help them align to resources. And before you ever get there, like having conversations before you ever have to fire them. Let's figure out what we can get on a work plan that, you know, can work for you before we have to go there. But when you find that it just won't, being kind, being respectful, but also being direct. And where you can, align resources for them to be able to use, particularly if it's a person who is just not, the organization is just not a great fit. But, you know, those are two different versions of letting people go. And I don't want to have to do either one of them ever again, hopefully.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hey, Candice, Sarah. I'm Derek Kane from Resolve Philly. I know all about you guys' work, obviously because we work together. So my question is, when you're thinking about community engagement and that being a part of your foundation, how do you, what advice would you give other news organizations, especially legacy news organizations that doesn't primarily have community engagement in the forefront of their work?
So Candice is like an engagement expert. So I'll just answer quickly and then you say something more engaging and better. I think that community engagement should be foundational. It should be the way that you determine your beats. It should be the way that you determine which investigations get the most resources. And I think that you need to think about, is this going to change the work? And the answer should be yes. Or is this sales? Is this just trying to get people to like my work? And that's not community engagement, that is sales. So stay away from that, because that's just, well, I mean, do it, but that's just promotion, it's not engagement.
And people will know the difference. People know when they're being sold to. One of my friends who is VP of marketing for Cadillac just did a podcast where she talked about that. And her job is sales. Like, ultimately, her job is to get you to buy a Cadillac. But she just talked about the idea that people they want authenticity, even when they're being sold to. They want to see themselves reflected. So if Cadillac doesn't put black and brown folks in their ads, funny enough, black and brown folks don't buy Cadillacs. And the same thing is true when you're doing community engagement. It's not just that I appear in your stories, but when I look in your newsroom, I see reflections of myself in your newsroom. I don't just see your journalists at press conferences and sitting at the tables with mayor and city council, but I also see them at block clubs and at community parties and at, you know, museums and at kids events, that they are holistically showing up in the community. And without that, you actually cannot really do engagement. And the engagement is not just you asking your audience to come into your events. So it's not just you hosting events and telling people to come to you. You are going to have to find ways to show up in your community authentically and holistically.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jodie Ginsberg. I'm the president of the Committee to Protect Journalists. I'm a huge fan of your work. I think it's absolutely amazing, and I could listen to you for hours. I have a question, though, specifically around safety. One of the things that we hear a lot from local newsrooms, increasingly actually in the States, is the increasing sense of vulnerability of local journalists reporting everything, not just the aftermath of shootings, for example, which creates trauma, but covering a political rally or a local political rally. I'm curious whether that's something you're seeing and experiencing, but also as a small newsroom, how you go about responding to that.
So we've been very lucky that this has not been a primary concern for us, but we work collaboratively with 9 other news organizations in the city, including a television station, a commercial television station, and that is much more of a concern for them. I think that when the smaller newsrooms have issues like that, we're going to turn to those groups and see, like, what is Channel 7 doing to protect their journalists, and what can we do? What can we take from that playbook? It is a concern of mine. I know that so far it's just been luck, and so even though it's not something that we've really experienced, we take safety training seriously, and we take bringing those resources into the newsroom seriously. And as an editor, that's one of my primary concerns. But the other thing is, I think that most Detroiters have our backs because we are covering the things that they told us to cover. And we're not covering things that are polarizing and then we're just inserting ourselves. If something's polarizing, it's truly polarizing, but there is a large group of people who have asked us to be there and asked us to cover it. And so I do think that that's part of the reason why we haven't had as much of a problem, is because when we show up at contentious city council meetings, we're there because a large group of people has asked us to be there. Yeah, okay. What? Are we at time? That was so fast. Okay, we're around. We have a tip sheet here that you can scan the QR code for. There's also stickers. Please take some. And we're just so thankful that you all have come and listened to us. Thank you. Thank you.